think we will probably start and then people can keep joining in. Good afternoon, everyone, and then welcome to today's webinar titled Livestock Transportation Emergencies Require a Team Effort. Sorry about that. A few housekeeping announcements before we start today's session. So we will be recording the session today. The recording link, as usual, will be shared on a later date via email as well as posted on our website. If you can't hear the speakers, make sure your computer audio is turned on or you can join by phone. For questions, use the chat and/or raise hand features to participate. And if you're joining by phone, you can unmute yourself and ask questions at the end of the presentation, or you can email questions to info@saskpork.com. Back to introducing today's speaker, we have Trent Catley, Director of Emergency Response and Inspection Unit. He's with the Livestock Branch and works for the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, and he will help producers, drivers, emergency responders, and animal health specialists prepare and respond to livestock transportation emergencies in the most effective manner possible. Trent has over 30 years experience in enforcement and emergency response, including 18 years in the fire service, where he developed and would deliver a livestock handling course for the Saskatchewan Voluntary Firefighter Association. Please join me in welcoming Trent. Trent, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm assuming too we're victims of this being the first nice day of the season. I just checked our temperature, we're 26, and people knowing it's being recorded, so that might be why. I was told there's going to be more participants, but I wouldn't blame them if they're outside. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and as was identified, if you have any questions, certainly put them in the chat. They'll forward them to me. I will share my contact information at the end, so you can reach out to me afterwards too if you have questions or personal stories or whatever you want to input on or whatever. Certainly feel free to reach out to me. We do only have an hour this afternoon. We have a little flexibility to go past it a little bit, but we'll try to stick to an hour. It is a lot of information we're going to go through. I'm only going to touch kind of the highlights or the high points. Mostly I want to just address items of consideration, things to think about to help foster further discussion and start the process, just to help raise awareness for livestock transportation emergencies. As I said, I was in the fire service for 18 years. I'm also a producer myself. So I realize, and just hearing from industry and that, we realize there is a gap in this whole field, the knowledge of the fire service, knowing of what to do in livestock emergencies. So hopefully, through sessions like this and raising awareness, we can start to address the issues and minimize that gap. So to start with, why do we even need training like this? Saskatchewan is an agriculture province. Agriculture industry, it's big in our province. We have lots of livestock. And if not all of them, pretty well every fire department within the province will be doing a rural response. The other thing, well, it's kind of the same principles, wildlife emergencies. There's lots of moose, deer, elk on the roads. If a vehicle hits one of them, again, the fire department is faced with some of the same issues, dealing with a large animal, having to extract it, working around a live animal, that sort of thing. The big one is the safety and welfare. This will apply to everyone. It'll apply to the responders, whether it's the fire department, police, EMS, any other professionals they might bring on scene, and also the animals themselves. Even people might think, wow, they're just going for slaughter. Those animals still do have the right to be welfare, treated humanely up until they've reached their destination. Or it could be breeding animals, or someone's pet, if it's the case of a horse. And another big one is public trust. We want to make sure that if there is an incident, it's done in a professional manner. The industry is responsible. We show we're doing things professionally. There's so many video cameras out there, phone capabilities to video incidents. We don't want to see bad press. We don't want to see a bad image on the industry. So we need it for the public trust. A little bit, let's look at the livestock numbers in Saskatchewan alone. There's 2.25 million cattle, 1 million of those being beef cows, just on the basic assumption every cow has a calf every year. So you're looking at 1 million calves are going to have to be transported. The pork industry, 1.8 million hogs go to market every year. That doesn't include the weanlings or the feeder pigs, and so this would account for about 9,500 trips a year, over 100,000 horses. As you can see, like sheep, bison, elk, deer, we're talking a lot of animals in Saskatchewan. And at some point, pretty well every one of those animals is going to have to be transported. But we also need to take into consideration other species. Years ago, it's kind of gone by the wayside, but the exotic industry like emus, ostriches, they used to be popular. Wild boar, there still is a small industry in Saskatchewan. Fur farms. I bet you a lot of people never thought of fur farms. Last year, we issued an import permit for farmed foxes coming from Quebec. There's 16 foxes. They're in individual cages, but they were transported in a 22-foot aluminum Wilson stock trailer, just like you see running down the highway all the time. So, you see an incident, you see the trailer, you never know for sure what type of animal you might find in there. So if there is an incident, 911 call is made, who's going to be the one that responds? It's a municipal responsibility to decide who responds. Under the Municipalities Act, it states, the purpose of a municipality is to develop and maintain a safe and viable community. So what is a safe and viable community? That's kind of open to interpretation. So that's why you can see a wide range of services in Saskatchewan in the fire service. And this applies to even the Trans-Canada Highway, going right through Saskatchewan. If there's an incident on that highway, it's whatever municipality that highway is crossing through, that is the municipality that is responsible for providing the response. There is no provincial standard on, what a fire department must do or what the response must be. It's up to that municipality to decide. So as an industry, we need to keep that in mind because municipalities, depending on their size, their budgets, it's going to greatly affect what their response capability is. So let's maybe look a little bit at the Saskatchewan Fire Service to help get an understanding of who are the ones that are responding to these incidents. I understand there may be some people on this presentation that are from outside of Saskatchewan. So while these are Saskatchewan numbers, the ratios are going to be very similar in other provinces and even throughout North America. So in Saskatchewan, we have approximately 400 fire departments. Out of those 400, only 4 are full-time departments. So that's your Regina, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, and Moose Jaw. So those fire department members, that's their only job. They're full-time. Then we have 4 composite departments. So North Battleford, Yorkton, Swift Current, and Weyburn. So that's a combination. They have full-time members, but they're supported by volunteer members. And then the remaining approximately 392 departments, they are volunteer departments. So you look at your members, so you have about 500 full-time members and 6,000 volunteer fire department members. Why it's important to realize or kind of know that the majority of the responders are going to be volunteer firefighters is these people, they have other jobs, other lives, they have adult responsibilities. So they're limited in how much time they can spend with a fire department. So kind of the standard is, or the accepted practice is your volunteer fire departments, they'll have 1 or 2 training nights a month, and they'll only practice about 10 months out of the year because like everyone else, they like their summers off. So they're only having 10 to 20 nights, training nights a year. And that's where their opportunity to learn these skills is. And there's 10,000 to approximately 10 to 12,000 calls per year. So for fire departments, depending on their location, it could be, they could have less than 5 calls a year, or they could have over 50 calls a year. Again, it's going to depend on the types of service they provide, how big is the municipality, how many people are in the municipality. So all this comes into play. So if they only have less than 5 calls a year and they're usually grass fires, thinking of having the equipment and providing the training for responding to livestock emergencies, that's probably pretty low on their priority list. It's not to say it's any less important, but we have to be sure to raise that awareness with the fire service. So there's a real misconception around the term volunteer firefighter. You'll hear it, well, they're a volunteer firefighter, these don't apply or this doesn't apply. That's not true. As a volunteer firefighter, they are still considered an employee of the municipality. So the occupational health and safety regulations apply to them. So there's two parts to that. So one, as an employer, which is the municipality, so they have to have a written plan that establishes the procedures that a firefighter or fire department is going to follow at an emergency incident. So the firefighters are considered employees of the municipality. So the municipality is responsible for determining what levels of service are going to be provided within that area. And then the other thing is, the municipality has to ensure firefighters receive the training necessary for the tasks they're expected to perform. So if we expect firefighters to respond to livestock incidents, or even any vehicle incident on a highway or grid road or whatever, they have to be trained in that area to respond. So at one time, most people, they had a direct connection to a family farm. Their grandparents lived on a farm or their cousins or something like that. But as time's gone on, there's become a bigger disconnect between the rural and urban areas. So people have lost that contact to the farm. So basic fire department training, I think it needs to start with, we need to teach fire departments how to even behave, how to operate around livestock. It might not only be a livestock incident, vehicle incident or collision. They could be called out to a barn fire. They could be called out to just assist. Emergency medical services, could be a medical emergency. Someone went down in a corral or barn. So these fire department members, a lot of them have lost that rural contact. So they don't even know how to behave or move or act around livestock. So we have to even start at the basic training there. There is a standard for animal technical rescue. So if fire departments are responding to an incident involving livestock, there is a national standard. It identifies best practices. It's what they should follow. The biggest downfall is there's not many training opportunities for fire departments to get trained to this full standard. But that's not to say we can't start somewhere. Even something as simple as just raising their awareness. On a training night, if a producer could just bring by a stock trailer, let the fire department see how our trailers, how are they laid out? Where are the hinge points on doors? What material is it made out of? Just start raising their awareness. That is all considered training. We need to start somewhere. So that being said, I look at the training as kind of a two-way street. We hear we need more training in the industry. Yeah, we need to train the livestock industry, or sorry, we need to train the fire department and how to respond to livestock incidents. They understand, they know how to do the rescue part, how to operate on an emergency scenes and all that sort of stuff. They just don't know the livestock side of things. Whereas the industry that may be called in to assist, they understand the livestock component, how to move animals, that sort of thing. But they don't understand the fire service, how operations, what type of operations they perform. And that's where it's important to reach out to your local fire department. Because as I said earlier, there is no provincial standard. It's up to that municipality to decide. So you need to know, what is that fire department capable of? Some fire departments out there are considered defensive only, which means they have no breathing apparatus. So they're only gonna, basically from a distance, deploy water cannons, hoses, whatever, and they're only gonna suppress the fire from the distance. If they don't have breathing apparatus, they're not allowed to suppress a vehicle fire because of the dangerous fumes that come off from a vehicle fire. So you need to be aware of that, or the other one, like to the right there, the dangerous goods suit, hazmat suit. What if the incident involved an anhydrous tank, and there's a hazardous atmosphere? That fire department may not have the equipment that's able to respond to that type of incident. So it's kind of tough as an industry to expect or plan for, a certain type of response if you don't even know what the fire department is capable of providing. To go along with that, you need to understand what fire department priorities are. Their first priority is life safety, in particular of the firefighters themselves, their response. And this dictates how they operate or respond to an incident. Firefighters, they're trained to operate in teams, and they always have a backup team. So if you see 3 firefighters roll up on a scene, they're going to be limited in what they can do because they can't start doing any hazardous or dangerous operations until there are 2 members, a full team to back them up. So if you have 3, 2 could do the response, but there's not a complete team to provide that backup. So sometimes you'll hear the comment, or you'll maybe even think yourself, well, the fire department showed up and they're not doing anything yet. Well, that's because maybe not all their members are there for them to effectively start a response and ensure their own safety. So they're not going to put themselves into a dangerous situation where they may become incapacitated themselves and then create an even larger emergency. So after their safety concerns have been addressed, then it's the safety of all others, so other responders, police, EMS, your tow truck operators, industry, if you're brought in as subject matter experts to help with the response, the victims, and the general public. So then everyone else's safety is considered. Once everyone's safety is addressed, then it's incident stabilization. So this is controlling what is the emergency. If it's a fire, they're going to start suppressing the fire, prevent it from spreading. If it's a hazardous materials incident, a fuel leak, they're going to stop the leak, mitigate it from spreading. So, and then after incident, once they've got that incident stabilized, then they're going to focus on the property conservation, saving whatever property they can. And this is where the livestock part of it would fall into. This part is they would consider the livestock as property. So once those other steps have been met, that's when they'll start to address the livestock component. So who is in charge? If a 911 call goes out, fire department responds. So who's responsible or in charge of the scene? Well, under the Fire Safety Act, it says in the case of a fire and emergency that requires a response, a fire department may take any measures necessary to address the emergency or lessen any threat to persons and property from the emergency. Kind of in a nutshell, it basically says they can do whatever they want, whatever they need to, that they feel is necessary to lessen the emergency. They, of course, it's not just a free-for-all, they can do whatever they want. They have to be able to demonstrate that the actions they took necessary were in an attempt to lessen the incident. And with this authority, they do have the authority to limit or restrict who is or is not on scene. Because it's an emergency scene, the fire department is responsible for everyone's safety on that scene. So just imagine, a vehicle collision happened on the Trans-Canada Highway on a July long weekend, and it's just wall-to-wall traffic. They're responsible for everyone on that scene. So not only are they trying to manage the incident, they're trying to manage the scene and protect everyone from all the traffic that's going by. Traffic control, that is an RCMP responsibility, but reality here in Saskatchewan, RCMP detachments, they're shorthanded, they have limited staff depending on their workload. So they're not always available to help with traffic control. So all that responsibility falls or may fall onto the fire department. So the big thing, or what, we want to start working with that fire department before they even get called to an incident. And that's in a pre-plan. So this is where we can start to develop that relationship with the fire department. Reach out to your local fire department and start to work with them and identify, what sort of equipment would they need. Some of your basic equipment, livestock panels, a loading chute, portable loading chute, halters, zip ties, pliers, lariat, 4-inch wide straps. 4 inches is, if you have to hoist or drag an animal out, a 4-inch wide strap is the minimum recommended width to maintain, enough contact surface on the animal itself, so you don't create a pinch point or start, binding into the animal. Kind of one just item of interest is 4 inches is also a 2.5-inch fire hose laid flat. 2.5 inches, a common hose that fire departments carry. So they will have that on board already. Hog boards or backboards for moving animals, prods, that sort of thing. And then the big one is your resources. Identify, what resources are available to assist the fire department with the response. Like I said earlier, fire departments, they may never have to do a response or have very limited responses to livestock incidents. So they're going to have to call outside subject matter experts. So you want to identify what resources are ahead of time, what local producers could assist, associations, veterinarians. Do you have a vet, if you need to administer anything or need a professional opinion, custom truckers, livestock inspectors, APSS, Animal Protection Services, police, that sort of thing. So you want to identify all possible resources ahead of time. But a lot of these, again, they're short-staffed, or they may have only limited staff, so they may not be available. And one thing to keep in mind too is some of these services, they may not do it for free. So that might be one of the first questions before you could get them to come out is, who's going to pay that bill? You don't want to be sorting that stuff out, in an emergency. So if you can deal with all those issues ahead of time in a pre-plan, then you don't have to worry about it. So what will the fire department role be if there is an incident? To start with, they're going to implement that response plan. So if you've done that pre-plan, if you worked with the fire department, or if the fire department has developed that pre-plan, then things are just a lot easier and a lot smoother. They roll up on scene, they can start to implement that plan. The first thing, like I said, they're going to secure the scene. They're going to go around it. They're going to identify all the hazards, kind of establish a scene area, emergency area, start to divert other traffic around it so that they have a safe, secure work zone. They're going to request outside assistance. So by identifying those resources ahead of time, some of those resources might be 2 hours away. So you want to contact those resources as soon as possible so that you can get them rolling towards your scene to provide the assistance. They're going to do the fire and hazardous materials control. So if it's a fuel leak, spill, fire, whatever, they're going to deal with that. They're going to provide the extrication. So they'll be doing the cutting, removing the material, the vehicle or the trailer from around a victim or the animals. And then that's pretty much where they will stop, or their knowledge or skill base ends. And that's where the other subject matter experts or the other people come in. So the fire department is then going to be there to support the other responders. So as an industry, that's where you could provide, or an expert could be provided to provide assistance, to help provide that direction or leadership to the fire department. But the fire department still has to maintain scene control, because sometimes it happened with the Balgony incident. I don't know if any of you remember, it's getting to be maybe 10 years ago now. We're just outside of Balgony. There was a livestock incident, a truck trailer hauling horses. They got everything removed. But after about eight hours after the incident, someone opened the truck door and a fire started. So a fire could start anytime when you're responding to an incident. So the fire department, they're still responsible for the scene safety. But the fire department can also offer assistance in other ways. Could be a hot summer day, they could provide mist to help keep animals cool. They can wash equipment, the road, of any animal byproducts or manure, anything that might be on the highway that might make the road slippery, so they can be utilized in those ways. So at an emergency incident, there's kind of some common thoughts or concepts. Keep in mind, avoid the use of a siren and minimize flashing lights if necessary. Set up as far away as possible. The emergency lights, especially at night, they're going to be needed though, because you want to alert other traffic to an emergency incident. But try to set it up as far away as possible. The fire department, they're going to evaluate the scene, try to identify all life safety issues, do a risk analysis, identify the hazards. They need to identify what animal type, how many numbers. One of the first things they need to deal with are loose animals. Loose animals are a hazard to workers, but they're also a hazard to traffic. especially if it's on a busy roadway, busy at night. Other traffic's going to be diverted by. Hopefully they slow down. Unfortunately, they don't always, but even at a slower pace, they might not see a stray animal if it's out on the road, cause another accident, and then your emergency scene just got that much bigger. Temporary containment facilities, or portable panels, they should be created before animals are released, even if the trailer or truck is on fire. If it's on fire, you don't want someone cracking open that door and letting all the animals out if they don't have a way of containing them, because then you just possibly could have made your situation worse. Have a bunch of stray animals out on the road, they get hit by passing vehicles, and then your emergency scene, like I said, just got bigger. Live animals should be removed from the trailer before it is moved. So before any movement or anything is moved, you got to remove all the live animals. And you don't enter the trailer until a plan is in place and it's stabilized. So in the stabilization, so before any work can be done, moving animals, extricating anything, first thing the fire department's going to do is stabilize it, the vehicle, the trailer. And by stabilizing it, they want to minimize the possibility of the vehicle or trailer moving anymore and causing, injuring the responders as they're working with it. So usually it's done with either wooden blocks. They just, as in the picture on the right shows, they just make cribbing with wooden blocks to help provide support, to strengthen up. Or they could use airbags, like in the, sorry, I think I said right earlier, or airbags on the right, where it's just big flat plastic airbags. They slide them underneath, they pump them up with air just to then stabilize whatever it is. They also use hydraulic rams or jacks, that sort of thing, if it's something larger. But the objective is they want to make it as solid and stable as possible so that it won't move. So once it's stabilized, then they can start the extrication. So the first thing, they'd have to determine what the trailer design and material is. It's going to be a lot different if they're only cutting through an aluminum trailer versus a steel. The preferred extrication point is through the back door, just for structural integrity. It's a little more solid, less chance of it collapsing. You want to check for protruding animal limbs, horns, make sure nothing's, if the trailer went over on its side, you want to make sure, as animals will get tossed around inside, you want to make sure nothing's sticking out. Big one when you're cutting, you want to ensure animals aren't pressed against the side. And cut the hole only as wide as the rescue vehicle. That's, if you're able to, fortunate enough that you can back up another trailer and just offload straight from that trailer onto the other one, you only want to make your hole as wide as that rescue trailer or the other trailer. But the other thing too is you want to make sure your hole is big enough so that the animals can get out themselves. So trailers, this is just an example or demonstration why it's important for fire departments to be familiar with trailers. If it's a liner, chances are pretty good that the fire department is not going to be aware that there could be up to 6 separate compartments. If you said to them, well, there's animals in the doghouse, you might get a blank look of them. So if they have the opportunity ahead of time to see a cleaned out empty trailer, walk through, see how the floors, in the front there, you have removable floor, that sort of thing. That'll just all help increase their knowledge and their awareness, and it'll make them that much more efficient and able to do the job when they're at an actual incident. So when it comes to the actual extrication, I'm sure most people have heard of the jaws of life. Well, that's what the tools on the left are. They're more commonly called spreaders. And then the other one there is called a cutter. So these are fairly large or hydraulic tools. They're starting to be electronic now, just as technology improves in that. But they are very efficient. They're used for physically cutting through hinges. The spreaders, they're for spreading materials, prying open doors, popping hinges, that sort of thing. They're very powerful. They're fairly quiet, and yeah, and they're not that intrusive, and they're very effective. But the problem with them is they're very expensive. So not all fire departments can afford that luxury. I see I'm missing a slide here. So then the other thing, the other slide that I had is the other tools that may be used for extrication are reciprocating saws, your cutoff saws or rotary saws, or air chisels. These are a lot more intrusive. I'm sure most people are familiar with the reciprocating saw. You could have a blade, 6-8 inch blade, but it's going to be moving back and forth, cutting through the material. So you could have 4 inches protruding into the trailer. If that trailer is flopped over on its side, your floor space is minimized. Chances are pretty good there's going to be animals pressed up against the side of that trailer. Well, you're not going to be able to use a reciprocating saw then to cut an opening, because every time that blade goes in, it's going to be impacting or hitting animals. So a plan has to be come up with, or you have to make sure fire departments are aware of that sort of thing. The other thing that comes with using these types of tools is they're very noisy. Can you imagine if someone is using an air chisel, just hammering away on an aluminum trailer? That's going to create a lot of noise, be a lot of echo, and that's going to get the animals. The animals are going to be worked up enough from the incident, but you start making more noise and vibrations like that, that's going to get them worked up even more. So that's going to be kind of, once we get to that part, like once the fire department has, they've stabilized the trailer, they've created the openings, that's about where their skill knowledge is going to end. And that's where they're going to be relying on the industry or other subject matter experts to step in and help them. Who's going to source the equipment for them, the trailers, the portable loading chute, that sort of thing. The animals, because of biosecurity reasons, if it's pigs that are on the trailer, are they going to be allowed to continue to their destination? So a plan needs to be in place for that. What are you going to do with the animals then? Where are you going to transport them? So all these things, the fire department's not going to have that knowledge. So that's where the industry needs to come in and help provide that area of expertise to the fire department. And ideally, a lot of this will be addressed through a pre-plan. What staff, or who's going to be experienced enough to join them? And as a producer, I can say this, just because someone says, show up on scene and say, oh, I have animals myself, that doesn't necessarily mean it's good experience. It used to be years ago where the thought was, yep, make as much noise as possible, beat on the animals to get them to go where you want them to. That's no longer acceptable. And also it's proven that, with the low stress handling methods today, it is more effective. There's a saying out there, the slower you work animals, the faster you can get the job done. And that is true. So just because someone shows up and says, I'm a producer, I've experience working with livestock, it may not be good experience. So you want to identify who are those good operators, who would be has good experience that can handle these animals in a humane, low stress, effective manner. So another particular piece that needs to be considered is euthanasia. So euthanasia is the humane termination of an animal's life. It's necessary when an animal's in distress and pain, or if the animals are unlikely to recover, and to ensure human safety. So non-ambulatory animals may not be dragged prior to euthanizing. And by non-ambulatory, they mean animals that can't move. So if you have a downer, something that's injured, can't get up, you can't drag it out, drag it off, and then euthanize it. It has to be euthanized there in place. The acceptable methods are gunshot, penetrating bolt with a second step, usually pithings, or approved drugs. With the approved drugs, it's under veterinary use only or under veterinarian guidance. The problem with a penetrating bolt or approved drug is you have to physically be able to where you can physically contact the animal. With firearms, ideally you still would like to be within 6-12 inches, but you're a little more flexibility. But in extreme cases, not ideal, but depending on the situation, with a firearm, at least so you could reach out, be at a safer distance if you have to euthanize the animal. Most emergency incidents, there is going to be RCMP or police on scene. They are appointed as officers under the Animal Protection Act, so they do have the authority to perform euthanization. They do have a firearm with them, but don't make the assumption that they're going to be able to do it. Lots of RCMP, they come out of urban areas. They may never have been, they're trained in how to operate a firearm, but they're trained for self-defense against humans. They've never been taught how to euthanize an animal. So they won't understand, how to landmark, do the imaginary cross between the eyes and the ears to be able to do it humanely. So just because they're on scene, they may not be knowledgeable on how to do it, or even the firearms they have may not be suitable to do it. If it's in a tight, crowded area, their 9mm or 10mm, whatever type of sidearm they have, or their 12 gauge shotgun with a slug, that might be too much of a firearm to use, and it might be more of a hazard than a lower caliber firearm. So you want to make sure these issues are all identified or addressed ahead of time. What's going on here? There we go. So again, the first step, like that's just kind of a quick rundown of things I want you to consider, to remember. But if there's one thing I want people to remember or to take out of today's presentation, the first step is talk to your local fire department, or reach out to your municipality, raise the issue, identify the possible concerns. I think I mentioned it earlier, fire departments, they don't know what they don't know. They might not think of or realize how big of an industry is out there. If you have trucks that are regularly going through, with animals through a certain municipality, they might not be aware of that. So reach out to that municipality, let them know, hey, we have this many trucks going through, this time of year or all year round or whatever. If something happens, are you able to respond? Get fire departments, maybe get them together so that not all of them have to have the capability to be able to respond to an incident, but through mutual aid response, where one provides initial response, but they can reach out to another fire department that has some expertise and they can come in and provide the assistance. So the old saying, failure to plan is planning to fail. That's where, with these livestock incidents, there's probably less than 10 incidents a year that happen in Saskatchewan. And that's part of the problem. Because there's so few incidents, fire departments don't think of training for that type of incident because the odds of it happening are very low. But we still need to make sure they are prepared, or we do have a plan in place. Any questions? I'm sure there will be, or hopefully that's, like I said, just kind of a quick rundown, just kind of hitting the highlights, just items for consideration. I just want people to realize that they need to reach out to their local fire department. Fire departments are going to be knowledgeable of the incident up until they've performed the extrication, created the opening, but their knowledge of dealing with the livestock side of things, it's going to be very limited. So that's where, as an industry, we need to be there to support the fire service. Okay, I'm going to just stop sharing my screen here, hopefully.
Thanks, Trent. That was very informative. We do actually have a question in our chat box. Toby asks, is there any documentation or resources available to share with our local fire department?
Well, there is, if you go online, there are some of the different jurisdictions out there. Like I know Ontario, I believe, has some pamphlets of kind of responding to incidents and that. But again, the biggest thing or best thing is reach out directly to your fire department yourself or the municipality, because like I said, you need to know what level of service they provide, and you need to establish that relationship with them. Because if there is an incident, they're going to be wanting to reach out to you as a producer, for that technical expertise. They can deal with the emergency side of it, but as producers, I'm sure everyone's aware that every livestock incident is different. You don't know how those animals are going to react that day or behave. Sometimes they might be quiet as can be, or it could be really windy. The wind could be disturbing them and make them difficult to work with. So you need to be a knowledgeable person to work with that livestock.
Yeah, agree.
I actually have another question for Trent.
Go ahead, Toby.
Do you have any advice or something to share with, let's say, not fire department, but maybe tow truck drivers, how to deal with like equipment that's not in an accident yet, like a truck in a ditch that's not rolled over yet, so they don't actually make it roll over.
You're talking like a truck still attached to a trailer?
Well, yes, still attached, then that's not an accident yet,
Yeah.
but if they don't know what they're doing, it could be a rollover.
Yeah, that's,
If you ever look at a trailer, and especially a livestock trailer, there's not many points where you can hook up to tow.
yeah, I don't have much experience, with dealing with the tow truck side of things. But again, it's, if you have concerns with the local tow truck operators, or it's all part of the planning process, try to get some of the local tow truck operators out to a training session. Like, again, it's kind of a similar thing, as it's probably very low on their list of incidents that they've had to deal with. So they might have limited experience in working with stock trailers. So any pre-planning, any pre-work you can do with any of them, it's to everyone's benefit.
Great. Murray, did you have a question?
Yeah, good presentation, Trent. I enjoyed that. But I get the idea that we should talk to our local fire departments and see what they know about transporting livestock and what happens in the case of emergency. But it seems to me the animals we are transporting are going to be out of the reach of our local fire department in 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something. So is there some sort of system where some training for fire departments throughout the province is harmonized or anything like that? Because, for instance, we transport animals to Manitoba. So to talk to each fire department between here and Brandon is not really feasible. I was wondering if there's some sort of provincial program or perhaps something with the various livestock associations.
Yeah, there is the Saskatchewan Volunteer Firefighters Association, which most volunteer departments are members of, and they have 2 schools a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. So when I used to be in the fire service, like kind of in my introduction, I did develop a course. It was a 16-hour course, and it was just to give fire department members kind of the basic knowledge. Like, we would bring in horses, cows, sheep, pigs, just kind of give them the basic, awareness of how to work and operate around animals, some of the things they need to consider when they're doing a rescue and that sort of thing. So there are the associations. By reaching out to your local fire department, you can kind of raise that awareness with them and just ask them, when you go to your regional meetings or at your different conferences, raise these issues with the other fire departments. And a lot of fire departments, they have mutual aid agreements. So they already have written agreements in place with, their neighboring fire departments. So if you kind of start with your own and start to get the message through them, then they'll start to hopefully get the message out. But yeah, so you could reach out, though. The Volunteer Firefighters Association does have 2 schools. There's also the Saskatchewan Association of Fire Chiefs. So as an industry, ask, they're always looking for presenters. Maybe the Association of Fire Chiefs, at their annual conference, just ask, hey, can we sometimes make an hour-long presentation at one of your conferences to help raise this awareness that, look, I know this doesn't happen very often, but we transport this many animals throughout the province each year. It is a concern of ours. If there is an accident, how well prepared are you guys? These are or you folks, these are the items of consideration. We're offering our expertise in these areas, or assistance or training opportunities or a field day. I think the big thing is we need to raise awareness and just start those discussions with the responders.
Great, thank you.
And Manitoba, I would assume I'm not too familiar with Manitoba, but I know there is like Canadian associations too. And I would assume there's probably a provincial volunteers association and a provincial fire chiefs association in Manitoba as well.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, while we're waiting for folks to think about, and I'm sure there are going to be more questions, I'm going to share my screen, Trent, and maybe share the locations of the livestock emergency units that we have across the province, just to let people know where they're at and what they have in them. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here quickly. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So we have 4 emergency livestock trailers across the province. What do you see right now?
We see the first slide still. You're not in presentation view though. You're
Okay. Just give me a second. Better?
yes, now you're in presentation view.
Okay, great. So this is how our livestock emergency response unit look like, and I'm just a couple of slides. So we've tried to put panels, plywood, snow fences in them, and they also are equipped with generator, lights, saws, and other equipment and totes. We do have complete lists of all that we have in those trailers, but just to give you a general idea about their size and what they have. We also have developed a few ramps over the past year. And this is where they're located at. So we can definitely share their locations with folks that are interested, and of course with the fire departments as well. So we have one at Humboldt, Moose Jaw, Unity, and Rama. So I just wanted to quickly show people where our livestock units are located. I'm just gonna stop sharing now. Okay, any more questions from the group?
Yes, Ravi, the last page you showed was the locations. Can you make that available on your website so that you can download it and print it?
I think it should be on it, Toby, but I can cross check, and if not, we can definitely put it there on our website. Trent, I have a question. So you mentioned that fire department officers and then peace officers may be appointed as animal protection officers as well. So is there any training opportunities for them before they're appointed in those roles?
No, that's just under the legislation, like the RCMP are appointed as an animal protection officer. That's more in mind of just enforcing the whole legislation. It didn't really, the euthanasia piece just kind of happens to fall under that. But yeah, I'm not aware of any training opportunities out there for, the police agencies to get any specific training in. Whether it's, working with livestock or euthanizing an animal or anything like that. And then again, that's kind of another one. If you reach out to your local fire department, encourage them to start reaching out to, the local RCMP detachment, find out what their skill level is, or knowledge. Like it's got to be a team effort, team concept. And, as time goes on, like the connection between urban and rural, like it seems to be getting lost more and more. People are becoming more urbanized, so they don't understand how to, or there's even getting to be less hunters, they used, if the officer's a hunter, then they'd probably understand, know how to euthanize an animal. But as there's getting to be less hunters in that, they're not going to be familiar with that sort of thing. So we need to, identify that team concept and get those, people involved right off the bat and raise awareness and the issue so we can get them the training.
Okay, great. Part B of the question is always funding. So I'm just curious, are there any provincial programs or CAP that might be able to help out if industry associations try to schedule some sort of training sessions with other commodity groups as well, and involuntary firefighters? Like, is there an appetite, or is there any funding that we can access to be able to take an initiative to organize those training sessions?
I'm probably the worst person to be asking about that when it comes to funding. I'm not too familiar with the programs, but I know there is, AHAM, the Animal Health Emergency Management Group, they have managed to get some funding. Their manuals have been more producer manuals, kind of dealing with an emergency. They haven't more dealt with kind of the emergency responder side of it. But the way programs are written, I'm sure if as an industry, come up with a plan, come up with a proposal, and I'm sure there would be eligible for some type of funding. Like I know the Sheep Development Board they came up with an emergency manual for producers. So really, I think it was through CAP funding, but how would it be any different if they came up with an emergency manual or emergency process for the emergency responders? If that makes sense. Like, it's, I always look at it, there's the two types of training that need to be out there. There's the one kind of, for the producers need to understand, what they can do to minimize their emergencies, and understand what fire departments are capable of. But then there also needs to be the training for the fire departments. They know how to manage the emergency scene, but they don't know how to deal with the livestock component of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, one more chance for everybody to think about if there are any questions. Okay, Trent, I think we have a very quiet group today, so I'm sure people will have questions later on. Of course, they can contact you via email or phone you. But if there are not any more questions right now, I really want to thank you for today's presentation. It was very informative, and I'm so glad you were able to present for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I hope people found something useful or helpful out of today. And yeah, I'm always available. I'd always be happy to discuss this with anyone.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.